It was a chill evening on New Year's Eve, the kind that held the promise of frozen fingers and warm hearts, but all I could think about was the weight of last year's responsibilities hanging over me like an unwelcome storm cloud. I could hear my family laughing and cheering in the living room while I sat on the wooden steps just outside the house, the chill penetrating through my jeans as I watched the colorful lights twinkle against the night sky. My name is Sam, and for the past 3 years, I had become the designated driver every single holiday. I loved my family, no doubt, but as the laughter echoed in the background, I couldn't help but feel a mix of resentment and exhaustion building within me. The beer-soaked promises of one last wild night had turned into a repetitive ritual where everyone else got to indulge while I faded into the shadows, always the one stuck waiting to make sure the fun didn't drive anyone into a ditch. The irony stung, especially when sort of a family tradition drew me away from the joy of the occasion. I knew I wasn't the type to start trouble, but tonight felt different. It felt like I was suffocating under the weight of expectations, a weight I had carried alone for far too long. So as midnight approached and my siblings began their enthusiastic chants of "Let's hit the town," while simultaneously cracking open drinks like it was an Olympic sport, I made the choice to step back. I decided I wouldn't partake this year, wouldn't shove the corks back into their champagne bottles or preemptively decline the drinks proffered to me. Instead, I summoned the nerve to voice what had been festering in my heart, and I found my father first, his hair turning silver under the living room lights, his laugh resonating like the chime of a joyful bell. "Dad, I need to talk," I said, feeling the lump of anxiety building in my throat. The laughter died down momentarily, and a palpable shift in the atmosphere flickered. "I'm not going to be the designated driver tonight." My family looked at me as though I had declared war on New Year's itself. The disappointment in their eyes stung more than I had anticipated, and while they, of course, understood the role I had played in our new tradition, my refusal was met with confusion followed by rising irritation, not just from my siblings but even from the adults who had initially cheered for my sacrifice. I heard the murmurs growing louder. "What do you mean? It's just one night. And come on, Sam, don't ruin it for us," echoed all around. My heart sank deeper with every voice, and doubts began worming their way into my mind. Could I really be that selfish? Was I truly ruining something so beautiful that we had shared? It felt as if guilt was wrapping around me like a tight blanket, smothering any hope of relief I had briefly felt. But just as quickly as the waves of uncertainty crashed in, they receded slightly when I decided to lay down my own terms. I proposed that we could all celebrate at home, together, no bar, no drunken escapades, just the 5 of us playing games, laughing, and counting down to the new year in the comfort of our own space. My mother's pleading eyes softened as they met mine, and I saw that she understood my need for balance. After a brief but intense back and forth that fizzled into silence, they ultimately agreed, albeit reluctantly. As we set up for a night under the glow of fairy lights and the warmth of shared laughter, I felt lighter somehow, as if I had carved an opening in the dam of expectations that had held me captive. We settled down to play games, eating homemade snacks, and toasting with soda as if we were the most sophisticated group of partygoers. In those moments of laughter, it became painfully clear that I had not ruined New Year's Eve. Rather, I allowed the festivity to shift from an obligation to a genuine celebration of connection that had felt lost amidst the chaos of tradition. Midnight arrived, and we cheered as one. I found myself wishing this would become our new ritual instead of the frantic runs to the bar and the drunken chaos our nights had often turned into. Now, reflecting on that chaotic night, I realized this was not merely an act of defiance but a necessary step towards reclaiming my joy in the midst of expectations. Everyone called it the most memorable New Year they had experienced since childhood, and I smiled a little when I recalled the surprise and glee in their eyes. Still, a small knot of anxiety clung to me, eager to know if my stance had indeed bruised familial bonds or somehow deepened them in the quiet of our shared moments. It wasn't until I received a text from my brother a few weeks later, thanking me for that evening, that I finally exhaled. "We can always go out next year, but I'm glad you stood your ground. It's time we return to what really matters," he said. I know now that sometimes, to embrace soul-deep happiness, one has to willingly stand against the tide and carve out their own space, catching tranquility amidst the noise. After all, joy doesn't only lie in the indulgence of reckless abandon but in the laughter exchanged in simple moments with the people we love the most. As the snow began to melt, revealing patches of earth long hidden beneath the winter's blanket, I found myself reflecting on my brother's message more often than I expected. It was odd how something that had started as a tense confrontation about my role as the designated driver had blossomed into a deeper conversation about our family's values. I spent time thinking about the chaos of that New Year's Eve, the loud music, the clinking glasses full of champagne, and the hazy laughter that seemed to surround everyone but me. Although I had been holding the weight of bitterness for being left out while my family indulged, my brother's kind words encouraged me to let that go. Life carried on, as it tends to do. Spring teased us with its gentle warmth, coaxing the world back into color. Yet, a sense of calm lingered like a forgotten melody from the past, and I began to crave more of that simplicity, more of those genuine, heartwarming gatherings that felt like home. I started initiating these moments, hosting small get-togethers where laughter and conversation flowed freely. We played board games, cooked meals together, and relished in the joy that came from spending time as a family without the distractions of a raucous night out. One Saturday evening, I invited my family over for dinner, fully knowing my mother would undoubtedly bring her infamous baked ziti and my father would come armed with a bottle of red wine that had likely been aging since before I was born. As the familiar smells wafted through the air, I took a moment to appreciate how much it meant to have the people I loved gathered in one spot, free from the pressures of expectation or indulgence. We began to share stories about our lives, and it was during this gathering that I realized my younger sister hadn't been quite herself lately. While everyone chuckled uproariously at my dad's corny jokes, I watched her face, which carried a glimmer of sadness behind her smile. Later in the evening, I pulled her aside into the quiet of the kitchen while the others continued their merriment in the dining room. She looked at me hesitantly, and my heart sank. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice soft and concerned. What unfolded was a tapestry of emotions, as she revealed worries about her own life decisions, feeling lost and pressured to keep up appearances. "I wish I could just be happy without feeling like I have to do what everyone expects," she confided, and in that moment, her words struck a chord deep within me. I wanted to tell her about the clarity I'd found since that tumultuous New Year's Eve, how it was okay to forge our unique paths in search of what genuine happiness felt like, but instead, I simply hugged her tightly. She seemed surprised, but after a moment, she melted into the embrace. As weeks continued to unravel, I saw my family transform, all of us nursing sprouted seeds of newfound understanding. Our gatherings morphed into mini rituals of love, no longer needing the chaos of parties or the allure of nightlife to find joy. We went on picnics at the local park, took day trips to the coast, and even set up a movie night under the stars in my backyard. Each time we gathered, unfiltered laughter echoed and the glimmers of hope rose in our hearts. Then, one evening, as the summer sun dipped below the horizon, bathing everything in amber light, my brother called me. "You know, I've been thinking," he said, his tone slightly hesitant, "I miss the way we used to celebrate the holidays without the stress." I hadn't expected that vulnerability from him, and it felt good to know that my stand held weight not just for myself, but for all of us. "Me too," I replied, a warmth spreading through my chest. "Let's promise each other that next New Year's, we create our own version of what celebration means to us, just us." As we spoke, I felt a bittersweet exhilaration. The new understanding among us transformed our previous traditions into something deeper, a rhythm that reflected who we had become rather than who we used to be. I realized then that standing my ground had sparked a revolution of sorts, in the form of connection and understanding within my family. It was a journey of rediscovery, where we learned that self-advocacy could pave the way for authentic relationships. And as the next New Year's Eve approached, I no longer felt the heaviness of the past, rather, I carried a placid certainty that our celebration would be remembered for its simplicity rather than revelry, for its acceptance rather than pressure. Reflecting once more on the past year, I understood more clearly now that shifting tides, though daunting, could lead us back to the shores of our own happiness, where the heart is light, laughter is abundant, and every moment spent together feels like a gift. I smiled at the thought of it all. Sometimes, to catch tranquility amidst the noise, you simply have to be brave enough to carve your own path. As the days passed into the new year, I often found myself thinking of my brother's text, his words echoing in my mind like gentle reminders of the importance of authenticity. It was invigorating, really, to feel that I had been true to myself, allowing the roots of tradition to pull us closer rather than tear us apart. My family had always been like a tightly wound clock, each spinning hand representing a different personality, a distinct desire. But somewhere along the way, we had lost the harmony of a simple timepiece, opting instead for a dazzling but chaotic illusion of celebration. I found solace in knowing that I had helped reorient that clock just a little, allowing us to tick in rhythm once again. New Year's Day dawned brightly, the winter sun streaming through the frosted windows, painting the room in hues of gold. The warmth of family filled the air, laughter erupting as my nieces and nephews darted around, their tiny feet padding eagerly across the floors, picking up on a contagious energy that promised adventure in the mundane. We gathered around the table, a feast of comfort food laid before us, rich with the sense of roasted meats and home-baked breads, and that familiar twinge of nostalgia pulled me back to childhood. We shared stories, moments of joy, heartache, and past resolutions colliding in a beautiful mess of chatter and shared laughter. I felt a swell of gratitude watching my parents, their faces softened with age but animated with love, gleaming as they witnessed the whirl of activity. My mother glided in with a tray of desserts, her smile radiating warmth, and for a moment I was reminded of the countless New Year's celebrations we had inadvertently sidelined for busier, more extravagant gatherings. Wandering through the gentle living room chatter, thumping music, and the intoxicating aroma of baked goods, I recalled the feeling of disillusionment I had once held about family gatherings. There was something so profoundly satisfying about stepping back and creating a quieter kind of connection, one untainted by expectations. We played board games that day, nothing elaborate, just the classics that brought a sense of familiarity and connection. I felt the worries of the past year melt away in those moments, absorbed in the simple joy of companionship, shared victories, and playful banter. My sister and I shared glances often, nodding knowingly, our hearts full as we recalled that fateful New Year's Eve of change. As evening drew near, and the sun sunk low, the golden light outside transformed into soft hues of lavender and indigo. I took a moment to step outside, breathing in the crisp air filled with the sense of pine and freshly fallen snow. I stood quietly on the porch, letting the chill wrap around me. From where I stood, I could hear laughter bouncing off the walls of our home, the sound resonating like music through the night. In that serene moment, I pondered how the world outside felt cold and chaotic, yet within the walls, everything was warm, safe, and messy, real. As I reflected on my decision from that previous New Year's Eve, I realized it wasn't about refusing fun or indulging in dullness, it was about saying yes to connection over chaos, love over obligations. I had discovered a new definition of joy. When I finally stepped back inside, the raucous laughter enveloped me like a long-lost friend. My heart soared as my brother rushed over to claim his turn at the board game, and I noticed the unspoken unity that hung in the air around us, an evolution from past mistakes into something beautifully different. As midnight approached, we all gathered, ready to face the upcoming decade together, a family again in tune with one another. When the clock struck 12, we exchanged hugs, whispered wishes for the year ahead, and breathed together in the promise of what was to come. There, surrounded by the echoes of laughter and the warmth of shared hearts, I understood that the path I chose had not just changed my journey but had rekindled a bond that was stronger and more assertive than ever, reminding me that sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is to embrace the ordinary. The richness of those moments would remain, timeless and golden, echoing softly in the chambers of our hearts. In a world that sometimes feels strained by the clamor of differing tongues, I found myself at the center of a linguistic tug-of-war with my husband, Tom. I've always had a deep passion for the German language. It had been a part of my life since I was a child, nurtured by bedtime stories my grandmother would tell me in her lilting accent. When Tom and I met in college, I was amazed at how he soaked in those stories too, admiring my enthusiasm for a culture that seemed so distant to him, an American born and bred. Over the years, that admiration blossomed into love, but in the intimacy of our shared life, our once attractive differences began to fray at the edges. Tom studied German diligently for a while but soon found the nuances overwhelming, preferring to converse in the simple, comforting rhythms of English. But I loved to practice my German, and as the months slipped into years, it became my default language, a habitual comfort zone that I didn't realize was isolating him. One quiet evening after dinner, the familiar dance of our conversation took an unexpected turn when he asked me, gently but firmly, if I could refrain from speaking German at home as it sometimes made him feel excluded. The request struck me deeply. It felt like a rejection of a part of who I was, yet his eyes had that vulnerable glint that said he was struggling with his own feelings too. I was torn. Should I honor his request, sacrificing my linguistic flair for the sake of his comfort, or could I, in good conscience, continue speaking German, even if it meant detracting from our shared space? My thoughts churned that night, the shadows of self-doubt creeping in, mimicking our sad quiet as we ended the day. Was I the asshole for wanting to indulge in something that was such a part of me, or was I merely turning my back on a plea from the heart? Days turned into a strange dance of half-phrases in English and attempts at German that felt like a betrayal to the warmth and fluidity I thrived in. I saw flashes of disappointment in Tom's eyes each time I caught myself slipping back into my cherished words. It was an unnerving cycle, Each apology towards him felt like another nail in my own heart. The bright candlelight of our evenings dimmed, booths in our favorite restaurants filled with the silence of unspoken grievances. It wasn't until a particularly stormy night that we truly cracked open the chasm between us. Sitting in our living room, rain like a relentless drum on the roof, I finally laid bare my emotions. I told him how important it was for me to retain that part of my personality, that it felt as intrinsic to my being as breathing. And there in that cozy, rain-soaked space, our hearts opened wide, he admitted that while he loved me and admired my passion, he sometimes felt like he was on the outside looking in. It was a powerful exchange, raw and painful, but it was illuminated by an understanding that only deepened our bond. We spoke until the rain slowed, weaving through layers of our emotions, fears, and desires. By the end, we found a middle ground. We agreed that I could speak German during specific times, perhaps in moments of playfulness or passion, while committing to using English for our everyday conversations. It was a compromise born out of respect and love, a promise to nurture both my passion and his feelings. Months later, wrapped in the warmth of our love and mutual respect, I found joy in the sounds of both languages echoing through our home. I realized that love, like language, is best expressed in fluidity and understanding. We created our own little world, embracing a balance that felt harmonious, a beautiful cacophony of English conversations sprinkled with delightful German whispers. Sometimes, in those quiet moments, I catch Tom grinning when I slip into German to narrate a mundane event. It's a reassuring reminder that rather than diminishing our connection, my passion is woven seamlessly into our shared rhythm. It brings us closer, sparking late-night discussions about culture and identity, far more intimate than a mere exchange of words. As for my own internal conflict, it reshaped me into a partner who learned the beauty of compromise, whose heart echoes with gratitude for the understanding we carved from our differences. And on particularly slow afternoons, we sometimes find ourselves curled up with a book of German fairy tales, and for just a moment, the language that brought me to life becomes a bridge we walk hand in hand upon. However, our peaceful coexistence faced an unexpected challenge that I hadn't seen coming, and it started rather innocuously, with a flurry of messages from a close friend who was traveling to Germany. She was sending me pictures of charming villages, bustling markets, and the kind of enchanting landscapes that always called to my adventurous spirit. Each image ignited a longing within me, stirring the remnants of my passion for the language and culture as if I were being beckoned back to my roots. I found myself daydreaming about walking among the timber-framed houses of Rothenburg ob der Tauber, sipping coffee in a quaint cafe while laboriously picking apart the intricacies of my beloved language. With each ecstatic message I shared with my husband, Oliver, I ventured deeper into my reminiscing. But then a thought began to fester like a shadow in the back of my mind. I was slipping away from our shared language, and would that not create a rift again? In a moment that felt like a culmination of tension, I set my phone down and took a deep breath, deciding to tell him. One evening, while we prepared dinner, I casually mentioned how much I missed speaking German fluently. As I said those words, I felt the sparks that often flew between us dim just slightly. He cleared his throat, his back turned to me as the garlic sizzled in the pan. "You know it's hard for me when you speak that way," he replied softly, the uncharacteristic strain in his voice tinging my excitement with remorse. I felt the warmth of the kitchen wrap around us, but a chill crept into my heart. I could see where this was headed. I was about to dance on the edges of our previous discussions, tiptoeing around old insecurities. My mind raced as I weighed the prospect of expressing my desire against the well-worn caution of his sensitivity toward my enthusiasm. In his eyes, my love for the language sometimes felt like a conflation of identities, a risk that threatened to dilute the bond we had carefully rebuilt. It was never that he didn't appreciate the beauty of it, he just felt far removed from it, as if it were a melodious tune he couldn't fully hear. I offered a kind smile and said, "How about we practice together? Just a little? It might help us connect even more." For a moment, his shoulders dropped as if a weight had been lifted, and then that familiar tension began to creep back. "I don't want to feel left out," he said, a hint of defeat in his voice. It cut deep. I had unknowingly placed him into a familiar corner, a place that meant both of us retreading an old, risky narrative. Yet, this time, I saw an opportunity. Instead of focusing on our differences, I could bring him into my passion rather than pushing him away from it. I let silence envelop us, letting his thoughts swirl in the still air of the kitchen, and when it felt right, I proposed a solution. What if I spoke as fluently as I wanted, but also shared the meaning? I could help bridge the language too, like I did before. We could find a balance. Slowly, I watched as his frown morphed into thoughtfulness. "You truly want to bring me with you?" don't you? He asked with a cautious smile. I do, I affirmed, the sincerity ringing in my heart, resonating through the air like the faint echo of a bell. Over the next few months, we began a new chapter together, one marked by our evenings spent in our cozy living room, dictionaries and notes sprawled around us, laughter punctuating the soft hum of our conversations. I shared with Oliver the stories behind the words, the richness of expressions and idioms that had once captivated me. I watched as his eyes lit up when unraveling the humor of a joke in German or realizing the affection imbued in a simple phrase. We even began to weave our private language, a blend of English and German that was uniquely ours. But with each passing week, our discussions deepened. The language, once a bridge and then a wall, transformed into a tapestry that enveloped us in colors of understanding. We talked about identity, culture, and our values, each thread strengthening the bond we had constructed over our differences. We shared our fears, Oliver expressing the insecurities of feeling linguistically inadequate, while I confessed my worries of losing touch with my heritage. And in those moments, the air filled with a shared understanding that surpassed words. Months later, as I nestled into the warmth of our oversized couch one rainy evening, surrounded by books and a steaming cup of herbal tea, it struck me how beautifully we had rebuilt our connection. The gray clouds draped outside, yet inside, it felt eternally sunlit with warmth and understanding. With my skin tingling from the memories of our journey, I decided to share our progress in a post on a Reddit community that focused on relationships. I titled my thread "A Myth Asshole WIBTAH if I only spoke German to my husband despite him requesting I don't?" But as I typed, it felt less like a plea for validation and more a celebration of a love that had transcended language barriers. Lastly, I fondly recounted our journey, the blending of cultures, how we found our rhythm again, and I concluded with a question to the community: have you found harmony in your differences? As I posted it, a sense of relief washed over me. I had made it through a tumultuous chapter, and now we stood, hand in hand, ready to explore the landscapes of our vibrant, shared life together. Soon after, I received a wave of supportive and insightful replies, many expressing similar experiences, which encouraged me further. Later that night, as I drifted off to sleep, I looked over at Oliver, his peaceful face illuminated by the moonlight streaming through our window. I realized anew that love, much like language, is a journey, not a destination. Each step we took together unveiled not just the beauty in our differences, but also the harmony that lay within, patiently waiting to be discovered. As the soft glow of dawn began to fill our bedroom, I stirred awake to find Oliver already up, immersed in his morning ritual of brewing coffee. The rich aroma seeped through the air, weaving itself into the fabric of my thoughts. I watched him from the comfort of our rumpled bed, the way the sun kissed his tousled hair, and felt a swell of affection. This was our life, a gentle dance of routine and spontaneity. But underneath the surface, excitement tinged with a sense of trepidation lingered. Today marked the beginning of my exploration into joining a local German conversation group. After my post online, a number of people had urged me to enhance my language skills further, not just for my own fulfillment but for the bridge it could build between Oliver and me. I knew he wanted me to improve my English as well, and while he supported my passion, there was still a mutual understanding hovering between us that needed to be navigated carefully. The group met in a cozy cafe downtown, where laughter mingled with the sounds of clinking cups and the soft whir of the espresso machine. As I stepped inside, the chatter seemed to swallow me whole. I spotted a table filled with fellow language adventurers, each with a story and a shared commitment to embracing a new tongue. With a nervous smile, I slid into an empty chair, the warmth of the gathering slowly enveloping me. Conversations took flight as we practiced phrases, stuttered over difficult pronunciations, and stumbled through the occasional awkward silence, laughter breaking the tension. I felt a spark of something familiar igniting within me, an eagerness to embrace the nuances. It was exhilarating, yet I couldn't shake the thought of Oliver, wondering if he would feel left out or if he was simply letting me fly on this new adventure. That evening, as we settled back into our routine, I couldn't help but share my excitement with Oliver. His face lit up with a genuine smile, yet beneath the enthusiasm, I sensed a flicker of apprehension. "It sounds amazing, actually," he said, pausing as if weighing his words carefully. "But promise me you'll still speak with me in English when we're home. I want you to feel free to express yourself with me fully." His earnest gaze met mine, sincerity draping each syllable in warmth. As I nodded, I could feel the weight of our unspoken understanding, a desire to balance my passion with the importance of our connection. However, the next few days were an exercise in self-discipline and compromise. I found myself wanting to slip into German more often, the phrases just at the tip of my tongue, eager to dance into the spaces we shared. But in doing so, I sometimes caught a glimpse of Oliver's discomfort, the furrowed brow when he couldn't follow my excitement, the brief silence when I spoke a sentence too rapid in my newfound confidence. This tug-of-war between my zeal and his request started to weigh on my heart. Were the walls I erected to protect my love inadvertently turning impenetrable? After a particularly frustrating attempt at explaining a simple story in German to him, resulting in more confusion than connection, I felt a rush of guilt clawing at my insides. I walked to the window, looking out at the twilight blending into night, the world outside a tapestry of muted colors. It struck me then how language, glorious as it could be, was a tool meant for connection, not division. Perhaps I had let my excitement overshadow the core of our relationship, and a wave of remorse flooded over me as I thought of our conversations where he patiently navigated between my two languages. That night, I made a decision. I turned to Oliver, who was curled up with a book of his own, and took a deep breath. "How about we create space for both?" I suggested softly, and he glanced up, surprise flickering across his features. "Let's set aside specific times for German. And when you're tired or lost, I'll be right here, ready to help you navigate back to English. Let's learn together." His eyes shone with a mix of understanding and relief as a smile broke across his face. In the following weeks, we embraced this newfound rhythm. Each night, we dipped into German for a little while, navigating through stories, fairy tales we both loved, or snippets from the news that intrigued us. When the words stumbled, we laughed until our stomachs hurt, and I cherished the look in his eyes as they sparkled with shared discovery and patience. Our evenings were filled with light-hearted attempts at pronunciation, playful teasing when one of us would mix up words, and the comforting realization that no matter the language, love threaded itself seamlessly between us. As I lay in bed amidst the whispers of night, I smiled, feeling a warmth blanket around my heart. I had aimed for fluency, but what I had found was something richer, an intimacy forged through compassion and understanding. Each mistake became a stepping stone, revealing the path that lay not just to understanding German, but deeper connections that breathed life into our relationship. The journey of language became a metaphor for our love story, filled with missteps yet painted with the beauty of growth, both together and individually. And as I reached for Oliver's hand, I realized that love, like language, was a living, breathing entity, forever expanding, ever changing, but always anchored in the safety of shared affection. It's funny how life can seem so normal one minute and then unravel completely the next. I remember sitting in my living room, maybe a week into the lockdown, the weight of the world pressing down on my shoulders like I was being buried alive. My name is Sam, and I had always been the type of person who thrived on routine, working from home when I was given the chance, taking my daily strolls to the coffee shop just 2 blocks away, and settling into my cozy chair every evening to read or binge-watch whatever captivating show I could find. The silence that enveloped my neighborhood during those first few days of the COVID lockdown felt almost foreign. It was like the world had pressed pause on the very fabric of our lives, and what should have been a simple moment of quiet turned into an unsettling void that echoed in my chest. My phone buzzed incessantly with news updates, family group chats, and the occasional Zoom invitation, further drawing me into a vortex of uncertainty, but I didn't want to join those calls. I didn't want to see smiling faces that felt haunted by the anxiety we all shared. What was meant to be a temporary setback had soon launched me into what felt like a living nightmare, my isolation only deepening as the days rolled into weeks. But as the months passed, I slowly began to adapt to this strange new reality. I started sharing my thoughts on Reddit, joining various communities to find solace among strangers, pouring out my feelings about the lockdowns, and sharing my experiences of loneliness and frustration. That's where I met Lucy, someone who felt equally lost and bewildered by it all. She lived several states away, her life similarly altered. Our conversations drifted from light banter to deeper reflections about loss and hope. Sharing snippets of our daily lives became our safe haven. She talked about her love for painting and the vibrant colors that often eluded her during the lockdowns, while I found comfort in her words and began putting my thoughts onto paper. What had started as a way to escape turned into a blossoming friendship. We began video chatting nightly, our laughter filling what had once been an empty void. The refracted sunlight streaming through my window as I sat on the floor with my laptop felt warm. It illuminated not only my space but also the corners of my heart that had dimmed. I had not anticipated feeling this connection during a time rife with uncertainty. Yet, as time marched on, I found myself wrestling with something I hadn't expected, the weight of a burgeoning affection for Lucy. It was undeniable, and with every shared late-night confession, my heart ached with the gravity of feelings unspoken. Would revealing my feelings jeopardize the solace we'd built together? The internal conflict tugged at my mind incessantly. I didn't want to ruin the one thing that had brought color back into my life, and still, I longed to tell her just how much she meant to me. One evening, as we talked about the future and the world reopening, I felt the courage swell within me like the tide swelling under the moonlight. In a raw moment of honesty, I confessed my feelings and admitted the delicate dance of hope that had taken hold of my heart. To my relief, she was quiet for a moment, and then smiled, her eyes sparkling with the very same vulnerability. It turned out she had felt the spark too, unsure how to voice it amid the chaos surrounding us. As the lockdowns began to lift and the world cautiously re-emerged from the shadows, so did our friendship blossom into something more profound. We planned to meet, finally collapsing the distance that had once kept us apart. That day arrived, the sun shining brightly in stark contrast to the rain clouds of the past year, and I remember pacing nervously in a small park where we agreed to meet. When I saw her walking toward me, there was an electrifying jolt in the air as if time had paused for just a moment. The laughter and love we had built from screens now resonated through the rustling of leaves and the soft chirping of birds around us. The discussions that spanned evenings and wrapped around our hearts became rich conversations in person, and in those quiet moments, I realized how much I had yearned for human connection. We embraced, and it felt as if I was breathing life for the first time after gasping for air. Reflecting now, it's surreal to think about how COVID was a catalyst, a strange and terrifying tragedy that somehow led me to Lucy, who now stands by my side as we navigate this post-lockdown era together. Life shifted dramatically during those months, and when I envision that time, I think of more than just isolation. I think of finding love, rediscovering passion and creativity, and rekindling the simple joys like the warmth of laughter. And to answer that imagined question in 25 years about life during the lockdown, I'll say it was during those dark days that I found the light in unexpected places, and, more importantly, within myself, igniting a flame that continues to burn, reminding me that even the darkest of nights can lead to a brilliant dawn. Update: a few months later, Lucy and I are doing well together, our bond stronger than ever. We've even started collaborating on some artistic projects, blending her painting with my writing, and it feels incredible to work side by side, creating new worlds together. As the world around us seems to find its rhythm again, I remain ever grateful for the quiet moments that led me to this exhilarating chapter of life, and I often remind myself that sometimes, amidst chaos, you can stumble into something beautiful and unexpected. As I sit here in the soft morning light filtering through our cluttered studio, I can't help but reflect on how far we've come since those uncertain days of lockdown. The space is filled with the heady scent of paint and freshly brewed coffee, a mixture that feels like home now, and it's easy to forget that just a few months ago, even stepping outside felt like a gamble. Lucy is perched on her stool, her paintbrush dancing across the canvas, lost in her world of colors and textures while I type furiously on my laptop, trying to capture the essence of our journey in words. There's an unspoken understanding between us, a rhythm that seems to sync our creative energies into a harmonious flow, and I often pause to watch her. The way her brow furrows in concentration and the soft smile that breaks through when she's particularly pleased with a stroke reminds me of everything we've learned in the chaos of those months apart. Our bond was forged in that strange silence of the lockdown, when we were forced to face ourselves and the depth of our emotions. Even when the world outside grew louder with conflicting narratives and demands for normalcy, Lucy and I carved out our own little sanctuary, one filled with art, laughter, and honest conversations. I can still recall the tension of those early days, the screen time stretching endlessly, the dread of the unknown gnawing at my stomach, and the conversations that oscillated between overly optimistic and painfully honest. I remember one evening in particular, where the weight of isolation hung heavy in the air. Lucy had called me, worry draping her voice like a thick fog. She spoke of loneliness, of dreams deferred, and fears bubbling just below the surface. I listened, feeling helpless from afar, but it was in this raw exchange that we unearthed our shared insecurities, and both of us started to voice the longing for connection. Slowly, we began a ritual of sorts. Every evening at 6, we would meet virtually, sharing snippets of our days, our worries, and our hopes, gradually stitching the gaping holes that distance created in our hearts. The soft glow from our screens became a lifeline. Over time, conversations turned into creative exchanges, and before I knew it, we were nurturing something that went beyond friendship. The moment we decided to collaborate, it felt like a blossoming flower, effortlessly unfolding, revealing colors and patterns we never knew existed. Once we began blending our arts, her vibrant, swirling colors complementing my stories that danced with emotion, we uncovered a new facet of our relationship. Each painting sparked a narrative, each poem inspired a vivid scene, and it felt as if we were building a bridge from our separate lives to one shared together, alive with inspiration. Today, as I watch her mix cobalt blue with hints of emerald, I can't shake off the gratitude that washes over me. I realize that those long, isolating nights ultimately gifted us with clarity, to see each other not only as creators but as partners navigating this unpredictable world. I wouldn't change a thing. As our brushes glide across the canvases, Lucy meets my gaze, a spark of mischief in her eyes. "Did you think the lockdown would lead to us being an art duo?" she asks, and I chuckle, shaking my head. I never saw the turning points as clearly back then, lost as I was in the noise of uncertainty. Now, with each stroke shared between us, I'm awash in the beauty of this unexpected journey. I muse over where we will go from here, as life continues to ebb and flow beyond the four walls of our studio. There are projects we hope to pursue together, displays at local galleries, eventually a joint exhibition where our creations can converse with each other in a shared space. Perhaps even a published collection, where her art meets my words, a testament of our intertwined paths forged through adversity. And on days when the world feels overwhelming, I find comfort in reminding myself that our bond emerged from that stillness, that even from chaos, we can arrive at harmony. As I finish my thoughts, the soft chime of Lucy's laughter drifts through the air, followed by the gentle swishing of her paintbrush. Just then, I feel a stir of anticipation, a realization that whatever life has in store for us next, we will embrace it together, as a team, holding on to the knowledge that even the most daunting circumstances can lead to the most beautiful beginnings. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, our little sanctuary of creativity flourished, much like the vibrant blossoms sprouting in the garden outside our window. The sunlight poured into our shared space, illuminating the canvas that had begun to sprout Lucy's imaginative strokes, while my words transformed into stories that danced around her art, creating a tapestry of color and emotion. I still remember the day we decided to tackle something new together. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon, the kind where the world seemed to hold its breath, and everything beyond our walls faded away. An impulsive idea took root amidst our laughter. Let's create a children's book filled with whimsical tales and striking illustrations, tales that could whisk young readers away to fantastical realms where anything was possible. But as the proposal took shape, so did a wave of uncertainty wash over me. What if the story I wove wasn't good enough for her art? What if my words overshadowed her beautiful brushwork, or worse, became flat under the weight of her brilliance? I watched her with wonder, her subject matter shifting fluidly between animals, landscapes, and whimsical creatures, each piece brimming with joy, and I couldn't help but question whether I was worthy of sharing this labor of love with someone so gifted. All of this churned inside me, a silent struggle against the rising tide of my own insecurities, until one evening, unable to contain it anymore, I laid my concerns bare, the vulnerability raking over me like a chill wind. "Lucy," I whispered, catching her mid-stroke, "what if my writing isn't enough to match your art? What if I ruin it?" She paused, met my gaze with her vivid eyes that held challenges and reassurances in equal measure, and said, "But it won't be about adequate or inadequate, it'll be about us, about our story. We're crafting something uniquely ours." In those words, like a gentle tide washing away the remnants of my doubt, I felt a surge of excitement swell within me. Our project wasn't merely a collaboration, it was a blend of our souls, forged from the fragility of uncertainty yet buoyed by the strength of companionship. So we dove in headfirst, spending countless hours immersed in inspiration, often losing track of time as we shared ideas and sketches, our laughter echoing through the cozy corners of our home. The world outside resumed its relentless pace, but within our bubble, we existed in a realm of creativity that felt blissfully untouched by chaos. As the book began to take shape, I found a rhythm, a harmonious connection emerging not only through our art and stories but in the deeper understanding of one another that we nurtured. During this time, I realized just how much I had feared vulnerability. I had barricaded myself behind walls built from self-doubt, never realizing how stifling and solitary those walls made me feel. In those late hours, bathed in the warm glow of string lights we had hung above our workspace, Lucy and I unraveled and stitched back together, revealing fragments of our pasts and dreams that previously lay dormant. One night, while we took a break, sprawled out on our living room floor, I felt an overwhelming urge to put pen to paper and write a letter addressed to the future readers of our book, a message filled with hope and encouragement for children who might feel lost or lonely, just as I had felt for a long time. It became a love letter not just to them, but to our journey, defining the importance of authenticity and the magic born from shared creativity amidst uncertainty. That moment felt like a revelation, as if all the noise of the outside world melted away, leaving only the soft whisper of possibility in its wake. As we neared completion of our project, excitement blended seamlessly with nostalgia. I knew this endeavor would leave an imprint on my life, just as the lockdown had done, allowing me the space to reflect, grow, and ultimately, find my creative voice. And then came the day when we finally held the finished book in our hands, our combined efforts manifested between the covers. It was surreal, the colors seemed to leap off the pages, and the words danced in tandem with the illustrations, a perfect testament to how far we had come since that initial bonding over comfortable silence. My heart soared as I looked into Lucy's eyes, her pride reflected in a radiant smile that lit up her entire face. It was in that moment I understood that I was not just embracing what lay ahead but also honoring the beautiful past that had brought us together. As I ponder my experiences during those isolation days, I find solace reflecting that remarkable connection, one that blossomed from quiet homes and simple conversations, reminding me that amidst unknowns lie the seeds of unforgettable stories, woven together in love, creativity, and collaboration. And now, every time someone asks about the lockdown years, I can smile, not just because of the chaos that once filled the air, but because of the unexplored beauty it unearthed, something that continues to inspire us, urging me to create and dream, hand in hand with the person who taught me how to see magic in the mundane. It was a typical Wednesday afternoon when my daughter, Clara, burst through the front door, her cheeks flushed from fresh air and excitement, the kind of joy only a 10-year-old could muster after a long day in school. "Dad," she exclaimed, her energy swirling around the room like a flurry of bees, "can Anna come over for dinner tonight?" On any other day, I would have jumped at the opportunity to have a friend of hers over, but that particular evening, I had a meeting scheduled that would run late, and Clara's best friend lived a good 20-minute walk away. Balancing work and family life was a constant juggling act, but this seemingly simple question ignited a flicker of guilt deep inside me, forcing me into a mental tug-of-war. "Sweetheart," I said softly, knowing I had to explain without dampening her spirits, "I have to leave for my meeting, and I can't walk Anna home after dinner like you want. I'll be back late." Clara's face fell for a moment, her bright smile wavering, but she nodded with an understanding that belied her age. "Okay, Dad," she whispered, but the disappointment hung thick in the air like a low-hanging cloud. As I prepared dinner, a simple pasta dish that Clara loved, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was letting both her and Anna down. After dinner, Clara felt it was essential to call Anna's parents to confirm she could stay for a little longer, and when the conversation shifted to how I wouldn't be able to escort Anna home, I heard muffled laughter on the other end of the line. "It's only a short walk," Anna's mom assured Clara. "She can handle it." I tried to shake off the sinking feeling in my stomach, but the weight of their reassurances felt like daggers piercing my resolve. I had never been one to shy away from responsibilities, and as the minutes trickled away before my meeting, the guilt morphed into an unsettling storm brewing inside me. What if something happened to Anna on that walk? What if I was the one responsible for that? My anxiety was heightened by the swirling chaos of parental judgment that we often hammered into each other on the schoolyard, the unspoken competition of who was doing a better job. I wondered, had I crossed a line? I genuinely believed my reasons were valid, but the idea of Clara's guilt was unbearable. I began to question whether I was, in fact, the one in the wrong. I eventually left for my meeting, doing my best to focus on the work at hand, yet the thought of Clara and her friend lingered as a whisper in my mind, reminding me of the company I was seeking to avoid. When I finally returned home, Clara was sitting on the couch, still waiting for me, while Anna had gone home, and I could not tell if Clara was sad or just simply tired. "Sorry, sweetheart," I murmured, kneeling beside her, "I know it wasn't exactly what you wanted tonight." To my surprise, she looked up at me with a smile that melted the tension away. "It's okay, Dad," she said simply, brushing it off with a wave of her tiny hand. Anna said she liked the walk. That revelation pulled me back, the bubble of relief rising in my chest. On the surface, it was evident Clara had accepted the situation, yet something deep inside me was still yearning for validation. Was I really the asshole here, or just a dad trying to balance practicalities with his daughter's happiness? I lingered on that question as I tucked Clara in that night, the moon casting a gentle glow through her window, and somehow, I realized that parenting meant navigating the gray areas where decisions could neither be categorized as purely right or wrong. A few weeks later, I stumbled upon a thread on Reddit titled "A Myth Asshole," and I curiously typed in my experience. The responses flooded in, varying from fellow parents who validated my struggle to some who accused me of negligence. As I read through the comments, a peculiar sense of community washed over me. It turned out, every parent has been faced with conflicting priorities, and perhaps, the discomfort that lingered in my chest that night was merely a reminder that parenting isn't about perfection, but rather the love and intention behind our actions. The post received a surprising amount of traction, and as I scrolled through a mix of perspectives, a gentle realization settled in my mind: there's no manual for being a parent, we all simply navigate through the darkness, hoping to find a flicker of understanding along the way. As these thoughts echoed in my mind, I savored the comforting warmth of my supportive Reddit community, reflecting on the multifaceted journey of parenthood, and there, amid virtual strangers, I found solace. It was neither the validation I had craved nor the judgment I had feared, but a realization that what mattered most wasn't if I was right, but that I cared deeply enough to question it in the first place. With that gentle realization still warming my heart, I found myself sitting on the edge of my bed, surrounded by the familiar chaos of my daughter's room, a tapestry of colorful drawings and dolls that had long ago discarded their pristine packaging. It was within this sanctuary of innocence and creativity that I began to understand the struggle each parent faces in their own way. I felt a pang of guilt about Rebecca, my daughter's friend, and how I had brushed off her request for a walk home. The faint echoes of their earlier laughter still lingered in the air, and I could almost hear the way the two of them had shouted secrets back and forth while playing in the backyard. It struck me then, that in my own swirling thoughts about chores and dinner, I had overlooked the little things that made my daughter feel secure and connected, and Rebecca too. I remembered how they would share dreams of future adventures while sitting on the swings, eyes bright with imagination. As the evening sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with soft purples and oranges, I tried to piece together what had truly happened earlier. That day, the moment when I dismissed Rebecca's request so easily. It was a moment softened by the warmth of familiarity, that unwritten bond between parents that often feels too delicate to traverse. Perhaps I had thought it would be too much trouble, or maybe I didn't see Rebecca in the light of concern that my daughter did, an almost extension of our family, a girl who laughed a little louder with us, yet remained apart at times. The outdoors were chilly now, the air carrying a crisp scent of fall that crackled like dry leaves underfoot, and I knew I needed to make things right. Before I had time to ruminate any further, I stood up and slipped on my shoes, the soles connecting with the cool wooden floor offering a jolt of determination. I headed downstairs, fueled by purpose rather than guilt, and opened the front door into that refreshing evening chill. I could still see the faint glow of the streetlights ahead, a warm beacon against the encroaching night. Clutching my phone tightly, I called Rebecca's mother. The line beeped, echoing my uncertainty as I waited for her voice, but when she picked up, she was kind, instead of judgmental. We briefly chatted, exchanging snippets of our days, and when I mentioned how I had been contemplating the walk home I neglected, I could hear the smile in her voice when she responded. It was all so simple, yet I felt the weight of each moment we shared gonna dissolve any lingering worries. She assured me Rebecca had made it home just fine, but before we hung up, I asked if it might be all right if I walked with her to school the next day, just to ensure I was a better neighbor and a better parent. There was a brief moment of silence before Rebecca's mother chuckled. Absolutely, I think she'd love that. As I disconnected the call, the tight knot of anxiety in my chest began to untwist. It was hard to describe, that feeling of connection forming anew in this little community encapsulated by the comfort of nightly routines and the soft glow of streetlights. I found myself wandering through the evening, letting my mind linger on small hopes that seemed very large, as I mulled over the power of small gestures and the simple, intricate dance of friendships. Children, I realized, see everything in black and white, navigating their worlds in vivid colors of love and care, and perhaps it was that innocence I had taken for granted. By the time I returned home, the stars were scattered like tiny lanterns across the sky, and every worry I had momentarily faded into the backdrop of an evening gone to slumber. As I nestled into bed that night, something shifted within me, as if I had shed a layer of my past self. Even in my mistakes, the willingness to act, to reach out, to bridge distances however small, became a quiet fortification around my heart. After all, being a parent isn't about perfection but is rooted in connection and those very moments when we recognize our missteps and find ways to grow. And so, with a grateful heart and a serene mind, I drifted off into a deep sleep, knowing tomorrow would hold new possibilities, both for me and for Rebecca, entwined in this dance of discovery we call growing up. The morning sunlight filtered through the curtain, casting soft patterns across my bedroom walls and nudging me awake. The remnants of last night's insights lingered in my mind like a gentle whisper, reminding me of the intricacies of parenting and the lessons tucked within every moment. I rose from my bed feeling lighter, ready to nurture not just my daughter, but also the evolving bond I shared with her friend, Leah. As I maneuvered through our cozy kitchen, its walls adorned with family photographs chronicling our collective laughter and tears, I heard the familiar patter of small feet along the hallway. Rebecca appeared, her hair a tousled halo and her eyes still heavy with sleep, but brimming with the exuberance of a new day. "Can Leah come over today?" she asked, a spark of enthusiasm illuminating her face. My heart warmed at the sight of her unfiltered joy, and I nodded, already imagining the giggles and games that would fill our living room. But a pang of worry threaded through my thoughts. Would Leah feel welcome? Would she, too, share that flicker of childhood glee? With a determined spirit, I set about preparing for their day together. A fresh pot of cocoa brewing, I arranged some snacks, goldfish crackers shaped like tiny fish and vibrant fruits that glistened in the morning light. I left the door open, listening to the sweet sounds of Rebecca making elaborate plans for their imaginary adventures. Over the next few hours, laughter erupted from the living room, a melody that transformed the mundane into a symphony of friendship. I occasionally peeked in, witnessing a tapestry of imaginative play unfold before my eyes, two young friends engaged in a world they created, a nexus of creativity that blossomed in joyous bursts. But as the clock ticked towards lunchtime, I noticed a fleeting shadow cross Leah's face, a furrow of uncertainty that contradicted her laughter. It tugged at my heart, the instinctive urge to protect my daughter from any hurtful situations. I approached them gently, inviting Leah to help me with preparing lunch, hoping to create space for our budding connection. She hesitated but eventually followed me into the kitchen, her fingers gently twirling a lock of hair, an involuntary gesture that revealed her unease. "You're really good at making art, Leah," I said, trying to bridge the gap with warmth. "I saw some of your drawings the other day. How do you come up with those ideas?" Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise igniting amid the softness of her vulnerability. For a moment, she hesitated before venturing, "I just think about what makes me happy." Encouraged by her response, I nudged the conversation further, weaving in my own experiences with art, how it had helped me find joy during tough times. As we chatted, I noticed her shoulders relax, the tension ebbing away with each exchange. By the time we returned to Rebecca, there was a subtle shift in the air. Leah's laughter rang clearer, buoyed by the sense of acceptance that filled our home. After lunch, the three of us sprawled on the floor with markers, paper, and sticky notes. I watched as Leah shared her ideas with Rebecca, who infused them with her own silly antics. They embarked on a frenzy of creativity, and soon the dining room transformed into an explosion of colors, the lyrics from their favorite songs floating through the air as they danced amid their imaginings. It was in those moments, those delicate and unscripted memories, layered with laughter and imaginative play, that I felt the morning's wisdom coalesce within me. I felt grateful for the opportunity to step beyond my own discomfort. After Leah's mother arrived later in the day to retrieve her, I found myself yearning for a way to continue fostering their connection, knowing it wasn't just about me learning to navigate the complexities of relationships, it was about Rebecca growing into someone who could embrace and understand her friends' emotions, too. I felt that night, as darkness settled gently over our neighborhood, that my heart grew alongside the girls' beautiful friendship. I reflected on the valuable lesson Leah had unknowingly imparted, about how even in our uncertainties, our willingness to listen and create connections formed an unbreakable bond that made us all just a little less alone in this vast world. Resting my head on the pillow, I closed my eyes and anticipated tomorrow's adventures, each day a new page in our story, a story I had the privilege, chaos included, to help shape alongside my daughter and her friends. As sleep enveloped me once more, I found peace knowing we were all just navigating this world together, a circle of support hand in hand as we explored the worth of every little moment, including those imperfect ones where our hearts expanded just a bit more. I still remember the summer of 1998, the air thick with humidity and anticipation as I sat at my family's clunky desktop computer, the faint whir of the fan mixing with the sounds of cicadas outside my window. I was 14 then, navigating the tumultuous waters of adolescence, and computer games were my escape, my safe haven from the befuddling maze of high school drama and insecurities. The game that sticks with me most is a whimsical little thing called Myst, an adventure that stretched my imagination like never before. Immersed in its elegant, surreal landscapes, I found places that felt more real than my everyday life, each click exploring a new dimension of intrigue and mystery. But it was more than just pixels and puzzles, it became a means of connection, a bridge to my brother Adam, who was 3 years older and often wrapped up in his own world of teenage angst. He would sit beside me, offering guidance when I got stuck or simply sharing his newfound theories about the game's story, our bond deepening with each island we discovered together. It wasn't long before the game began to mirror our real lives, each quest delicately paralleling our unfolding relationship. Yet, when adulthood began to call Adam away to jobs and responsibilities, I noticed a gradual, almost imperceptible shift. Weekend gaming sessions dwindled, often replaced with his late-night shifts at the gas station or hangouts with friends. I felt an unshakable sense of loss, like a favorite book closing after the final chapter. One rainy evening, when solitude wrapped around me tighter than ever, I revisited Myst, hoping to recapture that ephemeral magic. As I navigated its quiet halls and stunning vistas, I was struck by the changes in me, and the realization that the game wasn't just an escape, it was a story about connections, about journeys taken with those we cherish. After completing several islands solo, I decided to reach out to Adam. Over text, I invited him to jump back into the game with me one weekend, hoping to rekindle a piece of the childhood camaraderie we once had. Much to my utter surprise, he replied almost instantly, his excitement ringing through the words as he recalled our adventures together, and just like that, we planned a gaming marathon for the following Saturday. When that day finally came, there we were, side by side once again, uncanny echoes of our younger selves filling the living room as laughter and strategy flowed freely. As we explored a world built on connection, I realized that sometimes, life's greatest quests are those that bring us back together. In the end, Myst was more than a game, it was a reminder that bonds can fray but never truly break, provided we're willing to return to the roots of our connection. It was comforting, the way we fell into that easy rhythm of conversation and cooperation, the game serving as a catalyst for conversations we didn't even know we needed. As I sink back into that familiar world, I can't help but look forward to what mysteries await us, both in the game and in our lives. Update: after that weekend, we ended up making it a monthly tradition, turning our gaming sessions into deeper conversations about life, dreams, and the things we were too uncertain to voice otherwise. Sometimes, we still get lost in the world of Myst, and every time, it feels like we are unlocking not just virtual treasures, but also the lost pieces of our relationship. It may seem trivial to some, but to me, it was a reminder that sometimes all it takes is a simple game to stumble across the hidden depths of love and connection. As the months rolled on, our monthly gaming sessions became more than just a ritual. They morphed into a safe haven, a pocket of escapism amidst the chaos of our busy lives. I started to notice nuances I had previously overlooked, like how Sarah would lean slightly closer whenever we entered an especially captivating area of Myst, her eyes lighting up with a childlike curiosity that made my heart swell. It was in those seemingly insignificant moments that I understood how deeply intertwined our lives had become. We'd share stories from our childhood while solving complex puzzles, often losing track of time, and in those exchanges, I felt a sense of renewal, as if we were rediscovering each other all over again. But one evening, after a particularly intense session exploring the intricate landscapes of the game, Sarah surprised me with her vulnerability. "You know," she started softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "this game. It reminds me of how much I've been running away from my past." I paused, the glowing screen illuminating her face, casting shadows that danced with the flickering images. My heart raced, and a knot formed in my stomach because I knew her past was a tangled web of heartache and loss, an unspoken shadow looming over our relationship that we had never discussed directly. Encouraging her to share, I shifted closer and squeezed her hand gently. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice steady, though I felt the weight of her words hanging in the air like an unseen fog. She inhaled deeply, as if gathering the courage to traverse this new terrain. "I think," she began, her gaze drifting to the screen, "that I've been afraid to get lost in something real again. I felt that with you, but there's a part of me that still feels like I have to keep one foot out, just in case." Her admission hung there, raw and vulnerable, and I felt an intense urge to reassure her. "You don't have to be afraid with me," I said earnestly. "I'm here. We're in this together." I could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes waver like the flame of a candle, but still, she held back. The evening drifted on, the world of Myst fading away as we navigated through our own emotional landscape, a puzzle far more complicated than any game could present. Over the following weeks, we began to peel back the layers of our histories during these gaming nights. We made it a point to share not only our dreams but also our fears, pondering the choices that led us down our respective paths. Each session felt less like an escape and more like a step toward understanding each other. I recounted my teenage insecurities, how I'd grappled with acceptance, the sting of feeling like an outsider even in my own friend group, while she shared about her family dynamics, the pressure to succeed, the fractures in family ties that had scarred her trust. As our screens displayed vibrant worlds filled with mystery, we delved into darker corners of our hearts, discovering fragments of ourselves we had kept tucked away until now. Then one night, after a particularly spirited gaming session, I noticed something in Sarah's demeanor. She was quieter than usual, her brows furrowed as she stared at her reflection in the screen, the light casting a strange glow on her face. "What is it?" I asked, concerned that maybe I had pushed too hard. She took a deep breath, breaking the spell of silence. "I think I'm ready to confront my past," she confessed slowly, almost reverently. I could feel my heart race, an odd mixture of fear and pride surging through me. "But I need your help." My stomach fluttered, I nodded without hesitation, eager to support her. "Absolutely, whatever it takes." Little did I know, this commitment would lead us down a road of exploration and catharsis neither of us had expected. We started to create a vision board that illustrated our ideal future and goals, using gaming metaphors to articulate adventures we wanted to embark on, healthy relationships we wished to build, and experiences we wanted to explore together. Eventually, after months of navigating these intertwined journeys of healing, we decided it was time for a tangible adventure. We planned a real-world trip to a nature reserve, an escape as far from screens as possible. It was during that beautiful weekend, under a vast canopy of stars, that we engaged in our most profound conversation yet. Sat around a campfire, we spoke about our expectations of love, the way we envisioned our lives together, and the importance of addressing our fears rather than escaping them. As the fire crackled and the night enveloped us, I finally felt the full weight of Sarah's trust in me, and I understood that the foundation we were building was not a simple one, it was grounded in the courageous act of vulnerability. Months passed, and as I sit here reflecting on that decade-long journey, I realize how deeply intertwined gaming and life have become for us. It's incredible to think that what started as a way to escape ended up being a gateway into deeper connections, a means to confront fears and share dreams. I still don't have all the answers, but I do have her, and that suffices for now. Update: with our newfound understanding, we are considering starting a blog together focusing on mental health through the lens of gaming and storytelling, sharing our experiences and perhaps helping others see that sometimes the most healing adventures can be found not just in the virtual realms, but in the heart of the connections we nurture in the real world. The idea of starting a blog together was something we tossed around casually at first, as we sat comfortably on our couch, our old computer booted up, with the familiar sounds of mist echoing softly in the background. It felt almost surreal how much had changed in our lives since that fateful weekend when I had reintroduced her to the world we used to escape into as teenagers. We previously filled our days with unrelated chatter, but now, our conversations bled into something richer, more profound, each word punctuated by shared laughs and silent understanding. As the months went by, we wrote notes after our gaming sessions, capturing snippets of our thoughts and feelings, like how the island's puzzles made us question our own obstacles in life or how our collaborative approach to the game mirrored how we wanted to face challenges together, in the real world. It was during one of those late-night gaming marathons, as I failed to solve a particularly tricky puzzle, that it dawned on me just how much our bond had grown. She gently reminded me that even in our struggles, there was always a way to approach things from another angle. Her calm reassurances and the way she tilted her head in thought while gaming made my heart swell, and I realized how lucky I was to have her by my side, a partner not just in this moving virtual world but in this unpredictable, beautiful life. We finally settled on a name for the blog, Realms of Reflection. It resonated deeply with us, encapsulating the idea that gaming isn't just about escaping reality, it's also about wrestling with our innermost thoughts and experiences, providing a safe space to explore who we are individually and as a couple. When we published our first post, I remember the combination of excitement and fear swirling within me. The message was simple: gaming could be therapeutic. We shared our journey, the way we navigated through life's challenges, and how our sessions improved our communication and emotional awareness. Each blog entry felt like peeling back the layers of ourselves, exposing our vulnerabilities while inviting others into our shared journey. The warmth of our relationship grew stronger with every comment we received, as fellow readers related to our stories of anxiety and joy, and began to reveal their own tales of love and struggle. It was special to witness the community forming around us, a tapestry woven with shared experiences, making us feel less alone. What truly struck me was a comment from a dedicated reader who thanked us for reigniting her interest in gaming after years of finding it hard to connect with anything. She mentioned how reading about our experiences had encouraged her to pick up an old console and reconnect with her own partner, and the thought that perhaps our words had sparked a rekindling of love in another made my heart ache with gratitude. It was then I knew we were onto something much bigger than I'd ever anticipated. Our online space was not just about us anymore, it had become a vessel for connection, vulnerability, and healing one story at a time. A few months passed, and our blog began attracting a modest following, and with it came invitations to participate in podcasts, panel discussions, and even collaborative projects with mental health organizations. Each opportunity brought both excitement and trepidation. The weight of our stories now had the potential to reach even further. I found myself reflecting back on how a simple game had unearthed so many hidden pieces of my own life, pieces I'd almost lost to the chaos of everyday existence. Being able to share that journey with her was like holding a lamp in the darkness, illuminating the intricacies of our experiences while showing others they too could navigate their unique paths. I'm still navigating my own ebbs and flows, still piecing together the fragments of my fears and dreams, but now I do it with her, and for me, that's more than enough. Then one night, while we sat on our couch in the pale glow of the computer screen, she turned to me. With a twinkle in her eye, she suggested we create a space for people to share their gaming stories, perhaps forming a community where others could glimpse the progression from hardships to healing through the digital and emotional landscapes we explored. I was caught off guard but excited by the prospect. It felt like another adventure eagerly waiting to unfold. As I reached for her hand, the comforting familiarity of that gesture felt historic, like two explorers believing in the infinite possibilities of the paths we walked together. And just as we dove deeper into our ideas, laughter echoing alongside stories of virtual monsters and real demons, and the way we wanted to create meaning through our shared adventures, I felt the weight of everything leading up to that moment lift off my shoulders, making way for a future brightly filled with hope and shimmering with connection. In the end, it all feels seamlessly intertwined, games and reality, light and darkness, fears and comforts. And perhaps, just perhaps, life is a lot like Myst, a puzzle waiting to be solved where every click can lead to an unforeseen doorway, revealing new possibilities while allowing us to form unexpected bonds with each venture. The journey will continue to hold unknowns, but in the midst of it all, I understand I have her, my biggest treasure, my saving grace, and collectively we have people ready to explore their stories alongside us.